Good afternoon, everybody. You're very welcome to our webinar on eating for health. I'm just going to give everybody a chance to arrive. We are going to ask everybody just to complete a couple of polls first, just to give us some information about how you find the webinar. So I'm going to pop the first one up here. So if you want to just pop that in as you're going. Hi, everybody. To those of you who have just joined us, you're very welcome. You can see there's a poll just at the top here, and it'd be fantastic if you could fill that out just before we get started. I think we have a few more people still joining, and then we'll kick off. No, I think that's everybody. We'll end that poll. One or two more. That's great. Thanks for that. And we just have one other poll that we wouldn't mind you just having a look at for us. And just, it's really just if you have ever, if this is the first webinar you've attended with us, or if you're someone who's been to some of our other webinars before. Okay, well, thanks to everybody for filling that out. I see we have some people who've been here before, but quite a few of you, this is your first one. So you're very welcome to the Coeliac Society. We run webinars quite regularly on different topics around nutrition. A lot of them will be around celiac disease, but today we're doing one that's kind of wide open to anybody who wants to take part. So I'm going to pop up my slides here now, and we will start and have a look. And the topic today, as you said, is eating for health. And the reason we want to cover this is I think at this time of year in January, we tend to, we hear all about how we should all be, losing weight and getting fit and getting healthy and all of these things. And there can be so much information out there. It can be difficult to know sort of where to start with all of it. So I'm going to take you through a little bit on some sort of basic nutrition, really just what does my body need? And we'll have a look at some of the key nutrients that are important. And look, if you have questions as you've gone along, please feel free to pop them into the chat and I'll get through as many of them as I can at the end. So you are what you eat. I'm sure you've heard this expression before, but I'd love you just to take a minute and think about it because you are literally built out of the foods that you put into your body. So everything about you, from your skin and your hair right through to your muscles and your bones, are all made out of what you ate yesterday and last week and last month, because your body is constantly updating. I don't know if you've ever heard that you get new skin every 28 days. So if you've any dust around your house, an awful lot of that is your skin, because we actually shed about 50 million skin cells a day. So, we get new skin every 28 days, we get new bones every 10 years, we replace the muscles on our bodies maybe around, every 100 days. So, we do see real benefit to nutrition at any stage, because sometimes people say to me, is it too late? Is it too late when I'm a grown-up, or is it too late maybe when I'm older? But it's not. Your body is going to be renewing and updating all the time. So it's never too late to start having a look at what you eat. So we often talk with nutrition a lot about food groups, and I want to take you through the different food groups today. And the reason that we look at them is the idea with food groups is they pull foods together based on the sort of main nutrients that they give us. And the idea is that if you're getting something from each group every day, you have a much better chance of getting all of the nutrition that you need to be really healthy. So it's important that if you are cutting out an entire food group for some reason, to make sure you get some good expert advice, preferably from a dietitian, just to make sure you're not missing out on some of the nutrients. So the carbohydrate or starchy foods is the first one. And, these are the ones that we tend to love in Ireland. This is the bread and the pasta and the potatoes and the rice. And these are the foods that our bodies like to use for fuel. But the idea of fuel is very important because the amount of fuel that your body needs is really going to depend on how much exercise you actually do. So, if you have an elite athlete and they are going off to the Olympics, they can eat a huge plate of pasta and that's going to be fine. But, if you're like a lot of people in Ireland where your exercise is, a bit of a stroll on a Sunday, then that amount is going to have to come down. So when we look at carbohydrate foods, the portion sizes are going to be important. Now, from a celiac point of view, obviously, we need to look for gluten-free versions of these, so bread, you're going to be looking for gluten-free bread, pasta will be gluten-free and so on. Then a lot of the ordinary carbs can actually be unsuitable. Things like potatoes and rice, though, are going to be absolutely fine. The other thing to look out for with carbohydrate foods, though, as well, is the particular type that you go for. So we talk about portion sizes, but the type is also important because under the sort of the heading of carbohydrates, you have everything from your high fiber and your whole grains all the way through to your heavily processed white bread and sugar. And, technically they are all carbohydrate, but from a nutrition point of view, they're actually quite different. So if you look at sugar, for example, sugar is carbohydrate, but there's no other nutrition in there. Whereas if you go for something like a whole grain foods, a brown rice or a whole grain bread, there's a whole package of nutrition that comes with that. So the carbohydrate is there, but you also start to get things like your B vitamins, some of your minerals. I don't know if you know, but bread is the major source of iron in the Irish diet. And we also start to pick up our fibre here as well. And fibre is one of the key nutrients that I do want to flag to you because at the moment in Ireland, almost 80% of us do not eat enough fibre. The big problem I find when I'm running nutrition clinics is that, everybody thinks they're eating enough fibre. People think, I had a bowl of porridge, I'm grand. We actually miss out on quite a lot of fibre, and it's a pity because fibre does a lot for us. Fibre will help you to stay at a healthy weight. So we know that people who eat a lot of fibre find it much, much easier to manage their weight, manage their digestion as well. And it's to do with just gut bacteria and a little bit of appetite control. So that's one really big benefit. We also know that fibre, people who eat a lot of fibre get much less heart disease, they get much less cancer compared to people who avoid it. But we also need fibre just for healthy digestion. So just, keeping everything moving the way that it should, and whether you're celiac or not, we all need to get plenty of fibre in. And certainly when people do have celiac disease, it can be a little harder to get all of the fibre that's needed to get digestion working and moving the way that we want it to. So we've all heard of fibre, but so why are we not getting enough? So the main problem is that there tends to be less fibre in food than most people expect. So if you look at this number here, this 25, we need to be getting at least 25 grams of fibre in every day. So to be honest, somewhere between 25 and 35 is kind of the target. But if you have a look, a lot of high fibre breakfast cereals that you have are going to give you 3 or 4 grams of fibre. So if you're someone who just thinks about fibre at breakfast time, you're going to struggle to get all of the fibre that you need in the day. So the first rule for fibre is you have to think about fibre at every meal. So a high fibre cereal in the morning, and this can be gluten-free oats, or, if you're not celiac, ordinary oats are fine. All the different high fibre, there's granolas, all of those different cereals, they will give you 3, maybe 4 grams of fibre, and they're a good start. But then at lunchtime, if you're having bread, can you go for the brown or the high fibre bread? At dinner time, if you're having potatoes, can you eat them with the skins? If you're having rice, can you go for brown rice? So those little changes will start to top up the fibre for you. But even all of that is still only going to get you halfway. And this is where we start to look at things like your fruit and vegetables for fibre. But again, what are we getting? So if you eat an apple or you have a serving of carrots, you're going to get around 2 grams of fibre from that. So that's why we talk about eating lots of fruit and veg every day. A great place to add fibre, though, are seeds, and they're another brilliant gluten-free source of fibre. So things like linseed, flaxseed, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, they're all fantastic for adding fibre. And if you get 2 dessert spoons of any seeds, you can pop them into cereal, you can put them into yogurt, sprinkle them over salad. I've seen people make crackers out of them. There's loads of things to do with seeds. But if you can get those 2 dessert spoons in, they're going to give you around 6 grams of fibre, which is a huge boost in the day. And the other great food for fibre are beans and lentils. So, even something like baked beans are going to give you about 14 grams of fibre if you eat the whole tin. I'm not recommending that you do that. But just to say, beans have a lot of fibre. So even the small tins of things like chickpeas or kidney beans will have about 10 grams of fibre. So bean salads, bean soups, a lot of vegetarian dishes that are made on beans and lentils are fantastic sources of fibre as well. Now, the one thing I would say to you is don't go out of here in a big burst of enthusiasm and try and have all 25 grams of fibre tomorrow. Okay, you need to gradually increase your fibre over about 3 weeks is a good time scale, because if you do a lot of fibre all in one go, your digestive system is not used to it. It does not react well. So, if you wanted to increase your fibre, bring it up by 2 or 3 grams. And do that every day for about 3 days. And then you can go up by another sort of 3 grams with it. So maybe start off with 1 spoonful of seeds. Do that for a few days, let your gut get used to it. Then maybe have a look at bringing in, lentil soup or something like that. Do that for a few days and just gradually over the 2 to 3 weeks. And that just gives your gut and your gut bacteria a chance to get used to the new fibre. And that's going to work really well. Now, I can't work for the Coeliac Society and not at this point talk about what should be going on with our digestion, because what we do find is lots and lots of people have a bit of a funny tummy, but they don't realize it, especially if it's something that they've been going on with for a while. So, I often say, how do you know you're eating enough fibre? And really it is about looking at what's coming out the other end. So I apologize in advance for the detail I'm about to go into. But just so you know, if you're eating enough fibre, and you've nothing else going on, what should be happening, from the point of view of your bowels is you should be going to the loo once or twice a day. Okay, you should not be going once or twice a week. And if you're regularly going more than once or twice a day, I would check that out. We have lots of celiac members who maybe would have had a little bit of diarrhea once or twice a week, and they did that for years, and they just never thought that shouldn't be happening. If it's something you've done for a long time, it's just your normal bowel. But just to say to you, no, that's not healthy. So once or twice a day. It should come out with no effort. So even if you are going to the loo, like if you're actually struggling a little bit to get it to come out, you probably need to increase your fibre. On the other hand, if when you're going to the loo, it's urgent, and as soon as you feel like you need to go, you have to go straight away, that's definitely a reason to visit your GP if that's something that's going on for a while. And the last thing, and I apologize for this one, but it should look like a cracked sausage. So when I'm talking to the kids in the celiac clinic about, what they're producing, we'll often say, well, are you getting Brussels sprouts or cucumber or custard? And you want to be in the cucumber sort of section with it. So you've lovely visuals on that now, and we'll move on. So as I said, we do talk about fruit and vegetables for fibre, but your fruit and veg are also really, really important for a lot of your vitamins. So things like vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin K, you're going to pick up here. They have a lot of plant nutrients. We'd often talk about maybe antioxidants and things like that. And they all really support the immune system. They support the body, really very significant right through the system. And sometimes we sort of think, well, they're mostly water, so what's in them? But they have so many benefits in the body. So we know, for example, that people who eat a lot of fruit and veg get 80% less stomach cancer. We know they get around 45% less dementia, less Alzheimer's, they get less heart disease, less cancer. You even get less osteoporosis if you're eating lots of fruit and vegetables. So they just contribute so much to the body that they're an incredibly important food group. And I think we've all heard of people talking about getting, the famous 5 a day for the last few years. So the recommendation for fruit and veg at the moment is that we're getting 5 to 7 servings of fruit and veg a day. Now, you can worry about what's a serving, but to be honest, the simple way to do this is what I would always call the 1/3 rule. So from now on, 1/3 of every meal is fruit or salad or vegetables. And that is how you do this. It's that simple. So if you look at your breakfast in the morning, 1/3 of that should be fruit. So, can you have a few berries? Can you chop up a banana? They're all going to be fine. At lunchtime, if you're someone who normally has, say, a roll at lunchtime, that can end up being sort of 90% bread. So you might need to add a bowl of vegetable soup there or add a side salad there just to really bump up the vegetables with it. And then at dinner time, when you look at your plate for dinner, at least 1/3 of what goes on the plate, salad or veg. And if you have that going on, you're going to be really, really well covered. You're probably getting 5, even 6 servings just from doing that. And then, if you happen to eat an apple as well somewhere in the day, fantastic. Next group we take a look at are the dairy foods. So this is all our calcium-based foods. And when I talk about dairy and calcium, I'm really talking about milk, cheese, and yogurt, because these are the ones with the calcium, and it's calcium that we're really after here. So sadly, butter and cream don't have any calcium in them at all. Now, obviously, lots of people don't take dairy. So where do we go if we don't take dairy for calcium? So the next best thing to take is a calcium-fortified soya milk. And you just need to be careful with the plant milks if you're using them, is make sure they have calcium added. A lot of them don't naturally have a whole lot of calcium in them. So if you're using a plant-based milk, just check the label, make sure the calcium is in there, because you want to make sure that you're catching up with what you need for that. The reason we would talk about soy milk rather than the others is because it's closer in protein levels to dairy. And although dairy isn't the major source of protein in our diets, it is a big contributor. And if you do cut out dairy, and you don't replace the protein from somewhere else, it's one to watch out for. So particularly if we look at children who are allergic to dairy, it's really calcium fortified soy milk that would be recommended. Particularly for children, we don't recommend things like oat milk or coconut milk or rice milk for children. It really is very much the soy milk, but again, only if someone is actually allergic to dairy. The other thing is a lot of people with celiac disease are lactose intolerant. Now that can be temporary in most people with celiac disease, but for some people it can go on. You don't need to cut out dairy if you're lactose intolerant. You can use lactose-free milk, which is all of the nutrition. So that's a brilliant alternative. And cheese has very little lactose in it. So most people who are lactose intolerant have no problem eating cheese. So that's another great source of calcium. Yogurt is in the middle. There is a little lactose in yogurt, so it depends on the person how much they can tolerate themselves. So some people can tolerate a whole pot of yogurt and it's fine. Other people, half a pot is about what they can take. So it's a little bit of finding out. And if you think you might be lactose intolerant, do have a chat with your dietitian and just get advice about making sure you're still getting your calcium. Because we do need to talk about calcium and bone health. And in Ireland, we do see a lot of osteoporosis. Now, a lot of it is because we have a much older population. So as life expectancy goes on, we're going to see more diseases that are associated with old age. And osteoporosis is one of them. And it affects both men and women. And this is important to remember because I meet lots of women who've had their bone scans and lots of men who just haven't because they don't think about it as being a men's disease, but we all need to mind the bones. So in Ireland, 1 in 4 men in Ireland will break a bone due to osteoporosis. Now that jumps to 1 in 2 women, so it's a huge number of all of us. But if you have celiac disease, you're at an even slightly higher risk of osteoporosis. So incredibly important to get your calcium in for everybody, but especially if you do have celiac disease. So when it comes to bone health, calcium is one part of the story. We also need vitamin D. Vitamin D is incredibly important for helping us to absorb and to use the calcium that we eat. The big problem for vitamin D in Ireland is the complete and total lack of sunshine. And we've actually kind of a big issue because even in wintertime, so the sun that hits Ireland from October through to March, so where we are now in January, it's too weak for us to make any vitamin D. So even though I'm looking at my window here and it's sunny, if I go out for a walk now in that sun, I won't make any vitamin D because the sun is too weak at the moment. But then during the summer, the sun is stronger, but we get so much, I always love the experts call it cloud cover. I think the rest would call it rain in the summer. So very often we still don't make a whole lot of vitamin D. Now you can get vitamin D in foods like oily fish, you'll get a little bit in eggs, but it's very difficult to actually eat the full amount that you would need from those foods alone. And that's why certainly for people with celiac disease, we recommend a vitamin D supplement. And lots of people in Ireland are advised to take vitamin D through the winter. Particularly people over 65 and children under 4. I'd have to say I'd be a bit inclined to take a vitamin D supplement through the winter myself anyway, because we do see big issues around absorbing calcium if we don't have good levels of vitamin D. So going back to the calcium, so we need certainly a good 3 servings of dairy a day to get our calcium, or if you're using calcium fortified soy milk, you're looking for 3 glasses of calcium fortified soy milk, or say 2 glasses of calcium fortified soy milk and 1 carton of calcium fortified soy yogurt, or just mixing it up whatever way there, but do think about the 3 a day with that. So in terms of dairy, 1 serving is a glass of milk. Or if you put milk over your breakfast cereal, that's going to count. And if you like milky coffees, do cappuccino and latte, they're kind of half milk. So sort of 2 lattes will count as 1 glass of milk. So it's a way of just topping it up. I wouldn't often count the amount of milk you put in your tea because people put a lot less milk in their tea than they think. You put a little dribble in and you're not going to get up to 200 mils. Like if you like half a cup of milk and half a cup of tea, it might work for you. Yogurt is a great source of calcium, and please don't worry about the bit of sugar in yogurt. I see so many people giving up yogurt because they're worried about sugar. Like most of the sugar in a yogurt is going to be the natural milk sugar. It's not an added sugar. It's not one you need to avoid. And even in fruit yogurts, most fruit yogurts have 1 teaspoon of added sugar, and that's absolutely fine. If you compare it to sort of a 500 ml bottle of soft drink that has maybe 13 teaspoons of sugar, I wouldn't be worried about the yogurt. And the yogurt has such good nutrition. It has your protein, your calcium, your iodine, your B12. Like it's a really great food. I would say if you're eating the caramel toffee Christmas or crispy chunky caramel yogurt, that's dessert. Yes, there's going to be loads of sugar in that, but your ordinary strawberry yogurt or plain yogurt, absolutely fine to go for. With cheese, it's hard cheese. So soft cheeses like Brie and Philadelphia, they don't have as much calcium in them. They have some, it is in there, but you're looking at hard cheeses. So really things like cheddar cheese, So cheeses that you would slice rather than spread if you're really chasing your calcium with it. And you don't need to cut out dairy if you have high cholesterol, because this is another area of confusion for people. So milk and yogurt do not put up your cholesterol. They're going to be absolutely fine. Cheese can have a bit, but I wouldn't cut out cheese. Usually you might just need to limit it a little bit. Really, from a dairy point of view, what's going to be impacting cholesterol will be things like cream and butter. So the yogurt and milk are absolutely fine to take. Now, you can get calcium in some other foods. So if you eat things like tinned salmon, tinned sardines, if you have the bones with them, because of the process where they're canned, they actually soften the bones so you can eat them, and we get the calcium from that. So, you know, if you like tinned sardines or tinned salmon, it's a great way to top up your calcium. And you'll get some calcium in some green vegetables as well. Now, again, the green vegetables are a top up to your calcium. It's very difficult to eat the amount of green vegetables you need to get your daily calcium. You know, I often say if I was going to try and get all of my calcium from green veg, I'd have to eat 16 servings of broccoli a day, which could be difficult. So it's fine to add in things like spinach or rocket, as well as your dairy or as well as your calcium fortified soy milk, but they shouldn't be the main focus for your calcium. Do think of them as a top up. So next we've then are the protein foods, and this is all your beans, your lentils, your nuts, your fish, your meat, and these are just needed right throughout your body. And they're needed everywhere. So everything from your skin, your hair, your nails, right through to your muscles and your bones are all going to need protein. And what's really nice about the protein foods is your protein foods usually also come with a gorgeous package of nutrition in terms of things like iron and zinc and selenium and B vitamins, and they're just a lovely food to add in. So we do need to be getting protein foods about twice a day. There's no problem if you want to have it 3 times a day. What we don't need is huge amounts of protein. What's important for the body is just to get some in regularly through the day. So, you know, if you wanted to have some protein at breakfast time, you know, think about 1 egg, not 3 or 4 eggs. 1 is fine. Or if you wanted to put, you know, if you're putting seeds in your cereal, they will count as protein. High protein yogurt or just ordinary yogurt at breakfast time will give you little protein. At lunchtime, if you're someone who normally just has kind of soup and bread, and I see that a lot, particularly with women, just soup and bread at lunchtime, well, you put a bit of protein into that. So you need to maybe put beans or lentils or something into the soup, or you could put some tuna or hummus or cheese or something with the bread to get some protein in at lunchtime. At dinner time, if you're having meat or chicken or fish, you're looking about the palm of your hand. Okay, and that's loads, that's more than enough. Now, obviously, if you are bodybuilding, you need more protein than that. But for most of us who are doing, you know, maybe going to the gym the odd time, heading out for a walk, doing a bit of Pilates, we don't need huge amounts of protein. So that's going to be loads. And if you're vegetarian, you want to be getting sort of 3 sort of fists of beans or lentils through the day, or the equivalent in things like tofu is brilliant. You know, look at your nuts, your seeds, they'll all top up. If you're someone who does take dairy, so things like your yogurt and your cheese can be another option for protein as well. And the last of food groups are going to be your fats and oils. And we need a little bit of fat actually every day. I know every so often we hear, oh, sugar is terrible and we should avoid it. And then we hear fat is terrible and we should avoid it. But actually we need fat. If you cut all your fat out for about a year, your hair falls out, your skin falls off. And we see people getting really high levels of anxiety with it as well. So fat is a nutrient we actually need. We don't need huge amounts. And it's worth just keeping an eye on it. Now, you know, so it's not something you need to ban, but just when you're using it, kind of less, particularly, I have to say, if people are struggling with weight, sometimes one of the things to take a look at is the amount of fat that they're actually adding in. And what I'd often see is people cooking like incredibly healthy meals, but they've poured so much oil into it that actually the calories can be quite huge. And I think one of the issues with fat is that fat has double the calories of things like protein or carbohydrate, and it's also easy to eat a lot of it. As I said, we need it, and you know, I don't want anybody rushing out and cutting out their fat. But you know, if you're cooking something like, you know, spaghetti bolognese or whatever, measure out your dessert spoon of oil and put that in the pot and cook from there. Don't free pour, because you tend to add in, you know, the equivalent of maybe about 3 or 4 dessert spoons of oil with that, which you wouldn't notice if it wasn't there. So just keeping an eye on that. It does make a surprising difference. If you're for someone whose weight's kind of creeping up a little bit and you want to keep an eye on that, it's one of the things to take a look at. What we do need to really think about with fat, though, is the types of fat. So this is where we talk about things like your saturated fat. And saturated fat is the one that we do need to keep an eye on. And the reason for that is that saturated fat is linked with an increased risk of heart disease. It raises cholesterol. We know that it might be linked with things like type 2 diabetes, certain types of cancer. So now, again, we don't need to ban saturated fat, but a little bit less wouldn't be the end of the world. And we really find saturated fat in foods like butter and cream would be big sources. And I know there's been lots online in the last few years about how, butter is really good for you. We should all be eating loads of it. And I wish I could come in and tell you that was true. Really, we do need to limit things like butter. Then things like biscuits and cakes and pastries, because we do use saturated fat to make them. And then your processed meats, particularly things like sausages, black and white pudding, pate, salami, chorizo, would all be really high in saturated fat. Now, again, you don't need to ban them, but if you're thinking, well, I'm getting 4 a day from that list she just mentioned, it's probably time just to nudge it back a little bit. And especially if your cholesterol is high, have a look at those foods and just reduce the amounts of them that you are eating. The best time to go for in terms of cooking or eating is going to be your olive oil or your rapeseed oil. They're two really, really good types of oil to actually cook with. Watch out as well for coconut oil. I see a lot of confusion around this, but coconut oil is mainly a saturated fat. That's where we count it. So a little bit of coconut oil now and again, no problem, but your main cooking oil should still be your olive oil and your rapeseed oil. Now, there is one very special type of omega-3 fat, which is the omega-3s, and particularly the omega-3s called EPA and DHA. And we know these are really, really important for good brain function. So we know that particularly in terms of things like Alzheimer's and dementia, that people who eat a lot of these omega-3s, this EPA and DHA, they seem to get less Alzheimer's and less dementia. And this is because, I don't know if you know, but your brain is mostly made out of fat. So your brain is actually about 60% fat, and most of that fat is omega-3. And a bit like when I was saying earlier that, we're updating all the time with our bodies. So really looking after the brain, we need to keep popping in those omega-3s to keep the brain nice and healthy. But even we know that, low levels of things like EPA and DHA, those omega-3s, are linked with more anxiety and depression and so on. So there's lots of nice reasons to be adding these in. And the best place to go for the omega-3s are the oil-rich fish. So your white fish, things like cod and haddock, they do have a tiny bit of omega-3, but it's not a huge amount. But it's brilliant, to go for the oily fish, the salmon, the mackerel, the herring. They're really, really good sources. Now, if you like sea bass, although that's a white fish, it is one that has a decent amount of omega-3 in it. But lovely if you can get the oily fish in at least once a week, and don't be afraid to do it twice a week. And it doesn't matter what you do to them. So whether they are fresh or frozen or tinned or whatever, they are going to work really, really well with that. Now, you'll notice I don't have tuna in that list. So although fresh tuna will have a little omega-3, tinned tuna generally doesn't have much or any omega-3 in it. Now, tuna is still really good for protein. It's still a good source of vitamin D, but from an omega-3 point of view, particularly if you're going for tinned fish, your salmon, your mackerel, your sardines would be better for the omega-3. Now, I just mentioned nuts and seeds here because if we do look up nuts and seeds or omega-3s, these will pop up. But the type of omega-3 we get in nuts and seeds is different to the type that we get in fish. And although we see great benefits elsewhere in the body for it, we're not quite seeing the same brain benefits from the plant omega-3s that we do from the fish. Now, I would absolutely include the plant omega-3s. They are great for lowering cholesterol, for example, but it's brilliant if you can actually eat the fish as well. If you do like fish at all, I would definitely try and get the fish in. So, sorry now. We can't have a conversation on healthy eating, I think, without having at least a little mention of alcohol. Now, we used to be able to say it was good for you in small amounts, but the World Cancer Research Fund came out there a while ago and they said, right, alcohol is officially carcinogenic and we should all stop drinking. And actually the international sort of guidance in terms of alcohol is that less is good and none is better. So the bad news is there is no safe level for alcohol when it comes to cancer. Particularly in Ireland, we tend to sort of drink quite a bit. We see effects throughout the body, but particularly maybe on the liver. And it's just one to keep an eye on. So I don't know if you know when you've had sort of 2 or 3 drinks and you might be starting to feel it a little bit. I'm assuming at least some of you drink. That is your body telling you that your liver is no longer coping with the amount of alcohol you've just taken. And in most other countries, that is where people are going to stop drinking. Whereas, we tend to think about it as starting to work at that point. But it does mean your liver is struggling a little bit. So the bad news is once you're starting to feel the alcohol, it's the time to actually sort of swap onto the fizzy water or go home. And don't forget that even small amounts of alcohol can disrupt your sleep. So if you're finding that you're not sleeping really well, or when you wake up in the morning, you're not kind of feeling refreshed from your sleep, have a think. If even one glass of wine or one beer in the evening can actually be enough to stop you getting into your deep sleep. So it does have an effect on just your overall health with that as well. So how much do we talk about? So 17 standard drinks a week for men and 11 a week for women. I would say though that this is a limit and not a target. So if you don't drink, please don't feel you have to start. So 1 drink is half a pint of beer. So if you're a man drinking pints, it's a maximum of 8 pints a week. Now with wine, be careful because it is not a glass of wine. It's 100 mils of wine, which is quite small. Like if you think about it, if you were having a glass was 100 mils, you should be getting 7 glasses out of a bottle of wine and not 3. But that's on a white wine. If you actually look at the measure for red wine, would you believe that's 73 mils for red wine? So you should be getting 10 glasses of wine out of a red wine bottle. And I know wish I could see your faces because it's tiny. So just watch it, because I think most of us don't realize how much alcohol there actually is in wine. And a lot of people go over their alcohol without realizing it. And it's really because in Ireland, we tend to think about wine kind of like beer, and we tend to drink it like beer. We tend to put it in a large glass, we tend to gulp it. Whereas wine is a spirit. You have to think about wine much, much closer to whiskey, so that you're going to have a small glass that you sip. So I don't know if any of you have, the tiny wine glasses your grandparents would have had. They're the right size. They're a nice size glass of wine. So don't be using these big buckets. Small glasses with the wine, because actually if you drink a whole bottle of red wine on your own, that is somewhere between 8 and 10 sort of spirits, so 8 or 10 gin and tonics, for example, which a lot of people would never sit down and drink 8 shorts, but would actually drink a bottle of red wine over an evening. So just go easy on that a little bit. Really the advice about alcohol is that if you are drinking, really 2 drinks, and at most sort of 3 sort of drinks at one go. Now I know when I say that, people are like, that's a really quiet night in. So but just think about it, because I think the approach in Ireland tends to be that we do drink quite a lot more than not everybody. We're not actually the biggest drinkers in the world, which I was surprised, but we're not far off. We could do with limiting it a little bit, and also really have a few days a week that are alcohol free. Particularly think about your sleep, so that every day that you do drink, you're not going to sleep as well as you don't have the days that you don't drink. So just give your body a little bit of a break with that as well. So in terms of just pulling everything together, this is a very simple way to get started, because I know I've put a lot of information out there, and some of you will know quite a bit of it already. But a nice thing to do when you're sort of getting started on anything with nutrition is just learn to balance your plate. So when you look at your plate for lunch and for dinner, I'd love you to be heading in this direction, so that half of your plate is going to be your vegetables or your salad. Now that can be a bowl of vegetable soup, it can be a side salad. You might have done a chicken curry and you've put loads of veg into it. If you've done a vegetarian dishes, they're fantastic, because you can see people getting 4 to 5 servings of their vegetables in one dish with if there's a lovely chickpea curry or things like that. A good quarter of your plate does need to be your protein. So beans, lentils, fish, chicken, good third of your plate in there. And then about a third of it is going to be your carbs. So that's your pasta, your rice, your potatoes, your bread. Now watch this one, right? How many of you get the plate, cover the whole plate with pasta, and then put the rest of the dinner on top? People often say to me that carbs are very fattening, and it's like, well, they are if you have 4 servings when you sit down to them. So pasta around, quarter of the plate, or if you're very active, you might need a little bit more. So just with carbs, keep an eye on the portion sizes, because, sometimes, if you see a takeaway, the carton of rice that you'd often get with a takeaway, that is enough rice for 3 people. But we tend to think because it has come in the 1 serving, that it's 1 serving of rice. It's not, it's about 3. So just portion sizes are often a thing to keep an eye on. And watch the size of your plate. So again, if you're somewhere where weight's creeping up a little bit and you want to keep an eye on it, look at the size of your plate, because plate sizes in Ireland are actually 3 inches bigger all round than they were in the 60s. So we are today eating double the dinner that our parents ate. And it could be lovely, healthy food, but if it's twice the amount of lovely, healthy food, it can have an impact on our weight. So a good guide is just use a smaller plate, roughly actually about the size, if you were to draw a circle around your hand. That's a good rough guide of a size of plate for you. So if you check your own dinner plates tonight and you have a look at them and see how far off that you actually might be, and it can just give you a clue, because I meet lots of people eating really healthy food and the weight is just creeping up, and it's just portion sizes would be the thing to keep an eye on. So keep an eye on your nice portion sizes, and keep an eye on how you balance your plate. And that's a lovely, lovely way just to start getting going on your nutrition. So that's everything I want to cover with you today on food and nutrition. If you have any questions, will you pop them up into the chat for me there, and I'll go through some of them. Just to let you know that there is an opportunity to get a 20% discount on the Dietitian clinic for everybody who's attended the webinar today. So the clinic is with me, and we do run them over Zoom with the Coeliac Society at the moment. The offer is available until Monday 24th, and you're going to get an email with your voucher on that if you want to come along and see me. And just to say that I'm working with the Coeliac Society, And we represent people with celiac disease in Ireland. So we look after people who have celiac disease. We provide lots of services and information for them. We also do a lot of advocacy to help people find out if they might be celiac, because what we do know is that around 75% of people with celiac disease in Ireland are actually undiagnosed. So lots of people are suffering with lots of different issues with this and actually don't realize it. So we have a lot of information on the website. If you think you have anything going on with your gut, do get in contact with us or do talk to your GP with that as well. And we are coeliac.ie, and you can also follow us on Instagram at Coeliac Ireland. And we have lots of information coming up there, and you can get in touch with us there as well. So I'm going to have a look at the questions, but just as I'm doing, I'm going to stop this share here. I'm going to just pop up. We just have the last two polls just for people, just to kind of see how much information you sort of gathered while we were going along. And I'm going to have a pop in here and have a look at the questions, because I can see we have plenty. Any advice for high fueling prior to and during intense exercise? I've recently been diagnosed with celiac disease and I find I don't have as much energy as I did. So yeah, it can be a big change, because when you change from a lot of your foods with celiac disease, it can be a difference. So I don't know if you've had a chance to see a dietitian. Useful to sit down with that, and particularly if you're someone who's doing a lot of intense exercise, or particularly if you're exercising at a high level, a good sports dietitian can actually be really, really helpful, can be really good to take a look at. And if you want to get in touch with us at the Coeliac Society, info@coeliac.ie, I can put you in touch with some sports dietitians in particular. But sometimes what it is just adjusting to the diet and maybe giving it a little bit of time for your body to get used to what you're doing. Have a look as well, because we're just wondering, bread in Ireland often is fortified with iron, whereas we're not sure if the gluten-free bread, a lot of it isn't. So, you know, might be a thing just to look at iron in your diet as well, could be an issue with that. Sarah, what about alcohol-free drinks like wine, etc.? Are they very sugar heavy? They really vary. And I know the problem is that they don't have the label on them. So there isn't usually a whole lot of added sugar into alcohol-free. Now, it depends on the drink. So alcohol-free beer, no, generally doesn't have a whole lot of added sugar. Alcohol-free wine generally doesn't have a whole lot of added sugar. But I think it's your own taste. If you taste it and it tastes very sweet, it's probably sugar in there with that. But certainly most of them should be okay for that. If you're buying sort of alcohol-free cocktail mixes, they may have a little more sugar with them. I'm going to take a picture of the portion size of my plate and paste it up in my kitchen. You know, that's kind of one way. Now, we don't get obsessed with weight. I mean, like, we talk about weight from a health point of view. It's not that we all have to be super skinny or, you know, suitable to go on the cover of a magazine or anything. It's more just, you know, if your weight is to the point where it's impacting maybe on your health, have a look. But, you know, we don't all need to be super skinny. Are all seeds and nuts gluten-free regardless of the brand, like rice? I'm a little confused, as the celiac book lists some and not others. So nuts and seeds would be naturally gluten-free. What can happen, occasionally we'll see a little bit what we call cross-contamination with gluten in there. And now it's unusual for that to happen with that. Sorry, now I'm just going to pop up our last poll, and thank you to everybody for filling that in for me. So to be honest, nuts and seeds, you know, I can't remember the last time we saw gluten on them. It's not a common thing for that to happen. We do see a little more may contain gluten on, for example, lentils, and more recently on things like quinoa. So foods that are naturally gluten-free, we don't tend to put them in the book, just because the book would be the size of a house if we put everything in that's naturally gluten-free. But where we do see an issue coming along, we'll pop them in. So I think we're going to have lentils in the book this year for the first time, because there's so much cross-contamination happening in recent years with lentils. But your nuts and seeds should be fine. Where you might see them in the book is if they're flavored. So you might see salted nuts or dry roasted nuts, those flavored ones, or if they've chocolate coatings or something. But your plain nuts and seeds, they would be gluten-free. My 12-year-old son most mornings is doubled over with pain in his tummy. We've cut out the porridge. Would there be some other reason for random pains? I don't know if your son is celiac or not. There could be lots of reasons for it. What I would say is, if he's not celiac, maybe you've been to the GP with it. If he is, maybe go back, if you've seen a dietitian, if you can get in contact with this dietitian again. What I would see very often for children who are celiac is they often go from having diarrhea, and then when they go on the gluten-free diet, they suddenly back up into constipation, and they get a lot of pains with that. So, you know, the oats might make a difference, because some children will be sensitive to the oats. But I'd have a look at the fibre before I'd cut out oats. And then with the oats, if you think oats are an issue, because they are for about 5% of people with celiac disease, you've got to remember there's oats in a lot of gluten-free breads, there's oats in a lot of gluten-free crackers. So just cutting out the porridge might not do the trick. But if you want to send an email into us, maybe just give me a little more information on that. So info@coeliac.ie, I can come back to you maybe, and we can just see if we can get to the bottom of it for you. How would you replace sweet and sugary food cravings? Well, that is the big one. If I could wave the magic wand on that, I think I'd be doing very well. Look, humans are literally designed to like sweet things. We like them, we enjoy them. So they're going to be there, and they're part of some of the fun, I would think, with food. What I do see, and I've worked for a long time with people with different issues around nutrition, where there's very strong sugary cravings, there's usually two things. One, they're thirsty. So being a little bit dehydrated for some reason has a big drive for sugar, for sweet things. And particularly if you find you get your sugar craving mid-afternoon, that's the time to really try a couple of glasses of water and see, does that do the trick? The other thing is, very often, if you have a lot of stress or anxiety, or you're just really busy, there's a lot going on, your body does tend to crave a little more sugar. So sometimes the solution there is, well, I often go, go on a holiday would be lovely. But is there anything you can do just to relax a little bit? If you have a bath in the house, can you get into that for 20 minutes? Can you get out for a short walk? Can you do something that just relaxes you? And sometimes just taking the stress down a little bit. And if you're someone who gets really strong sugary cravings, sometimes what's useful is actually to put a timer and just go, I'm going to wait 10 minutes. And if in 10 minutes I still want the sugar, I'm going to have it. And very often it passes. And it's often a little bit like if someone's trying to give up cigarettes, when you have the really strong craving for the cigarette, you put the 5-minute timer on. And often by the time the 5 minutes has come, the craving for the cigarette has gone. So that can be helpful as well with that. What about cholesterol creeping up without eating cakes? Is that just from being celiac? So there's lots of reasons why you can have high cholesterol. It can be genetic, it can be diet, it can be definitely celiac. So people with celiac disease, usually before diagnosis, can have a little bit more cholesterol than other people. So that does come in there. What I would say is there's a lot of things to look at. So with cholesterol, you're looking at what you might take out, which is the things like the biscuits, the cakes, the sausages, the butter, things like that, but also what to add in. So gluten-free oats, beans, lentils, flaxseed, they're all foods that will actually lower your cholesterol. So they're often worth to have a look at coming in. Generally, we can get slightly higher cholesterol just as we get older. So it's just one of those things with getting older. And sometimes it can be genetic with that as well. So really have a chat with your GP, or maybe book in with your dietitian, because your dietitian will be able to go through your diet and see if there's just somewhere where it might be creeping in for you. Sarah, how good is it to use sunflower oil in salad or cooking? Absolutely fine. No problem to do that. Also, I eat a lot of goat's cheese and milk instead of cows. Am I getting the same amount of calcium and protein? Yeah, pretty much. They're about the same with that. I will also say people often think there's no lactose in those, but there will be lactose in sheep's milk, goat's milk, cow's milk. But from a protein and calcium point of view, they'll be similar. The only thing is a lot of the goat's cheese that we have in Ireland is soft. So it has a little bit less calcium compared to hard cheeses with that. But I think it sounds like you've plenty in there anyway. If you are diagnosed with osteoporosis, should you take calcium supplements? So if you can actually get from an osteoporosis point of view, the best thing to take is the dairy, because it's not just the calcium in the dairy. There's lots of factors in dairy that we know is really, really good for bones. So if you're diagnosed with osteoporosis, try and get your 3 to 4 servings. So if you have osteoporosis, I'd be heading into the 4 servings of dairy a day. So try and do that. That's going to be brilliant. If you really struggle to do that, yes, your calcium supplement could be brilliant, but it wouldn't be the automatic thing to take a look at. The supplement you do need if you've osteoporosis is vitamin D. And you also need to do what we call weight-bearing exercise. So in the same way that you will build muscle when you exercise, you'll build some bone as well. It's really good. Now, swimming doesn't work because you're not carrying any weight on your bones because you're floating. But things like yoga, Pilates, lifting weights, brisk walking is fabulous if you have osteoporosis in your hip. Now, obviously, talk to your doctor. It depends on how fragile your bones are, but just building up that muscle actually really supports the bone as well. So they'd be the 3 big things to take a look at with the osteoporosis. What do you think of soy yogurts? As long as they've calcium added, absolutely fine. No problem with those as well. Thanks to Sarah and Jennifer for everything. Very welcome. It was great to have Jennifer, and Sinead actually is with me today helping out. What's the daily recommended dose of vitamin D? So I would tend to look around 10 micrograms a day. There is a recommendation for adults over 65 to take 15 micrograms of vitamin D a day in the winter. And then for children under 4, there's a recommendation to take 5 micrograms of vitamin D a day. That can be as a tablet, but if you use fortified milks that have vitamin D added, they're a great way to get them in as well. a lot of gluten-free foods seem to have a lot of sugar. How do you accommodate them into your diet? Well, do you know what's interesting is they don't actually seem to. I mean, it's a myth. It's a thing I hear an awful lot, and you will get some absolutely that are high in sugar, but we're in the process of doing some research into this at the moment, and we're kind of surprised that the differences in sugar in a lot of gluten-free foods actually aren't as big as you would think based on what we tend to hear about it. So there's always options. If you look at the label, you can definitely select the ones that have the lower amount of sugar in them. I mean, I often go, people say, oh, well, there's lots of sugar in the gluten-free biscuits. And you're like, well, biscuits are biscuits. If you're looking at things like pasta, bread and cereals, they're actually not a massive difference we're finding at the moment. There we know. What do I think about chia seeds for fibre? Fantastic. All the seeds are brilliant. So if you like those, go for it. My 12-year-old was recently diagnosed as celiac. TTG was only 10, but the biopsy showed blunt villi. She was eating gluten and not showing symptoms. That definitely happens. After time in the gluten-free diet, will she be more sensitive and more likely to react? So possibly. And what we see, particularly with children, is that if they've been celiac for a while and they don't seem to have any symptoms, sometimes what's happening is they've actually been in pain for so long, it's just become a normal part of their life. So they don't even think about mentioning it. It's nearly they come immune to it isn't the right word, but it's one of the reasons you'll often see kids just not in great form. So once the gluten comes out, they feel great, excuse me, but it means that when the gluten comes in again later, the pain comes back, and it might not be any worse than it was before, but now they're not used to it anymore. So it's a big, so I would see excuse me, I'm going to pause for 1 second and just clear my throat. So I would say one of my kids is lactose intolerant, and he would have had a lot of bloating for years, and we took him off the milk and we investigated and all the rest, and it was fine, but he never complained of being in pain. But after about 6 months on a lactose-free diet, my mum gave him ice cream one day and she didn't think, and when I say we had 2 hours of screaming over the night with it, and it just was, he had been so used, and you think, God love them, the amount of pain they must have been in, but just were tolerating it because they were used to it. So it doesn't seem from the research we have that you become more sensitive to gluten. It just seems that your tolerance for the pain or the discomfort of it actually has gone. Some people don't ever get a bad reaction when they eat gluten physically. The same internal damage happens, but hopefully she'll be one of the ones who doesn't feel very sick when she does eat gluten. I'm never sure about additives when a food item is not labeled gluten-free. I check the items in bold on the label, and if there's no wheat, barley, distilled vinegar, I think it's safe. I'm not sure about sulfites and another preservative. So, sorry now, sulfites are not an issue for people with celiac disease unless you have a sulfite allergy. So 2 things I would say about labels. They do, if there is gluten in the ingredients, they do have to list that. If there's glutinous cross-contamination, they don't have to list that. Now, most manufacturers do, but just because a label doesn't have a may contain gluten on it, doesn't mean that it's gluten-free. So it's a very confusing issue. And it's one of the reasons why we would encourage everybody who's celiac to get their food list. Now, you can get it on an app these days, or we have the food list book that you can use, and just always double check for a lot of manufactured and processed foods. So sometimes it's not on the label, but there is gluten in it. And, it does become very confusing. And, we have a whole food list team that spends, and I'm telling you, they spend 6,000 hours a year contacting manufacturers, checking and just really making sure what's available. So do have a look at your food list. And if there's a particular food you're really not sure about, email into us and we'll see if we can find out for you. My 12-year-old son blood test didn't show up as celiac yet. He's low in iron. My instinct still feels like he's celiac. What can I request next from my GP? So, I mean, it is chat your GP with it. So if they're low in iron, and particularly if taking iron supplements doesn't bring it up, or it brings it up but it falls back down again, you're probably coming to the point where he might need to have a scope done just to see what's going on the inside. About 10% of people with celiac disease will be negative on the blood test. So the blood test is a screen, it's not a diagnosis. And you can actually be positive on the blood test and not be celiac. So again, it's really important for adults in particular to get the biopsy. So you might just need your GP, have a chat. Your GP will have a better idea of what's going on. But what I would have a look at for your son is, and I know this is a lovely thing, especially when he's 12, is to track his poo. Is he going every day? Is he constipated? Is he diarrhea? That lovely question, is it Brussels sprouts, cucumbers, or custard? Because when you start asking him and you see, oh, actually, he's getting a bit of diarrhea, or maybe he's normal. But tracking those things, it means you can kind of go back to the GP and go, well, actually, he's getting bloated 3 days a week, or he's having stomach cramps, or he's constant. Now you can be constipated with celiac disease as well as diarrhea and have normal as well. So it's, But it would be, I'd have a chat with your GP. You need to find out why his iron is low. Now, maybe he's not eating a whole lot of iron, so it might be a case of going to see a dietitian, just getting his diet checked. But if there's celiac disease in your family, he's at a higher risk, so things like that. If you want to get in touch with me, maybe I can give you a bit more information on it, but yeah, have a chat with your GP. Is taking vitamin supplements every day bad for your stomach or bowel? No, it's absolutely fine. Now, you don't need to be taking very, very high doses of anything with that. But just if you wanted to, if you're taking something like a top-up multivitamin, it's not going to be bad for your stomach with that. High doses of iron might upset you. I use the 1 cal spray for cooking fat. Am I getting enough fat on that? And I also use butter. Yeah, you should be fine. And it takes a lot of effort to be totally fat-free with it. And the 1 cal spray is fine. Remember, you're also going to pick up healthy fats in things like your fish, your nuts, your seeds as well. So we tend to be really good with that. Okay, I think right, everybody is saying thank you. So you're very welcome. I'm glad you found it useful. Just see if there's any more questions. Okay, I think that is everything. Question on gluten-free oats. Continuing to have inflammation in the stomach on a strict gluten-free diet, could oats be causing the problem? Sometimes they can. So about 5% of people with celiac disease will react even to gluten-free oats. So what you might do is take maybe 6 or 8 weeks off the oats altogether and just see how you're feeling. Get your GP to check your TTGs, see if they come down, if they've been high. But as I said, watch out for oats, not just porridge. It's a lot of breads and crackers and bars and cereals will have oats in them. So do get into checking the labels quite a bit for those for yourself. Right, I had a colonoscopy last year, and when I was discussing it with the nurse later, I mentioned I was a celiac. She said she knew by looking at the slides, because the villi were different with celiacs. I thought the villi returned to normal when following a gluten-free diet. They should. So to be honest, I maybe pop back into your dietitian and just see, is there gluten coming in somewhere, or if you're oat sensitive. So the villi should come back fully to normal. Now, it can take about 2 years in adults for it to come back to normal. So if it's still less than 2 years after you're diagnosed, it might just be that it's taken its time to get better. With that. Now, let me just see. Do you think that good diet and exercise is enough, or do you need meds like Prolia injections if you're diagnosed with osteoporosis? If your doctor has recommended the Prolia injections or any other medicine for the osteoporosis, I would definitely take it. When I qualified as a dietitian in the 1990s, and we had no treatments for osteoporosis at the time. It's a horrible disease. It's a horrible disease. The fact that we have treatments now, I would absolutely use them. I worked on an orthopedic ward, and you don't want osteoporosis, and if there's treatments available, it was the most amazing thing. People don't realize what a breakthrough it is to actually have some treatments for osteoporosis now, because we didn't have them 25 years ago, and osteoporosis can cause a lot of misery. But I would chat to your GP. If you're nervous about taking the medication, talk to your GP, talk to your pharmacist. But if your doctor is recommending it, I really would be inclined to go with it, to be honest. I have a 9-year-old diagnosed nearly 12 months ago, much better, good appetite, but still very slim or underweight. What's the best way to bulk her up? To be honest, I would be popping back to her dietitian and just get some specific advice on that. And because the dietitian will have her weight and height records, so it'd be good to get those tracked and just see where they are with that. So maybe just pop back in to get your GP, even to refer you back to the dietitian you saw when she was diagnosed, or give them a ring yourself and just follow up on that for you. If I continue eating oats while having some sort of reaction, am I doing harm? Probably. If you're having a bit of a celiac reaction to oats, you're probably damaging the lining of your gut. You're saying you need them to stay regular. Again, there's lots of other ways to get fiber in if you're having a problem. So maybe check in with your dietitian. Obviously, you can book in with us just to get some ideas around it. But yeah, you would, if you're having a reaction to them, I would be inclined to take them out. Sorry. Is there something recommended to help the gut if you're experiencing random morning pains? It's how long is a piece of string? I'd really need to have a sit down and chat, or maybe talk to the GP about it. Very often random morning pains are that kids need to go to the loo. I know you're saying it's 12-year-olds. Sometimes kids hang on. That they won't just go every day, or they're too busy. So I know, even my kids will love me saying this, but my own kids occasionally, they say I have a pain in my tummy. So, well, did you go to the loo today? And then they go off, and then, that solves it. But if you're finding problems with that, check in with the GP for it. How long would it take for high liver enzymes to return to normal when following a gluten-free diet? So we do see in some people with celiac disease that the liver enzymes can be a little bit higher. I don't actually have, it's a really good question. I don't have a time on when they should come back to normal. So, you know, if they hadn't come back within about 6 months, I'd probably pop into the GP and have a look, because so many other things can affect liver enzymes. So it's probably no harm just to keep an eye on that one if they are staying high with you. Couscous and quinoa are advertised as gluten-free. Couscous is not gluten-free. Couscous is pasta. It's a type of wheat. You can get rice couscous, which is gluten-free. There is definitely one in the food list, but ordinary couscous is pasta. So really that's not one to have. Quinoa is naturally gluten-free, but I have seen a may contain gluten label on a couple of packets of quinoa recently. So just check your label on that, but the couscous is definitely out with it. Let me have a look. What is the, we've got all of those. Yeah. Yeah. I think we have all of our messages then, do we? Just checking in. Is malt vinegar gluten-free? That is the big question. I don't think so, is the best answer I can give you. You wouldn't believe the amount of research we have done into this in the last year. It is made with a barley mash. Technically, it's there should be so little gluten actually left in it at the end that it's fine. But I couldn't hand on heart say to you it's definitely gluten-free. Now, you can get distilled malt vinegar, which is gluten-free. Your ordinary white vinegar is going to be gluten-free. Your wine vinegar, your cider vinegar. There are lots of other options for vinegar. So at the moment, I wouldn't be telling you to take malt vinegar, but I would, you know, we're really trying. The big difficulty is actually getting a test that works on it, because it's acidic. A lot of the normal gluten tests for it are not terribly accurate. So we don't know. Is the simple answer on that one. I would steer clear for the moment until we get a better guide on it. How do you check for gluten sensitivity not seen in a blood test, but had sensitivity reactions working with bread? So in blood tests, you can look for the TTG, which is the celiac blood test, but you might have a wheat allergy. So that would be an IgE for wheat very specifically, and your GP can do that for you as well. It depends on where the sensitivity is. So whether, I don't know whether it's on your skin or if it's in your gut. So again, that would be to sit down with a dietitian or maybe check in with your GP on that, because sometimes people, if they're eating wheat, you might actually, it might be not the gluten that's the problem, but there's another thing in wheat called fructan, which a lot of people can be sensitive to. So it could be a lot of different things with that. So I'd maybe just have a chat with the GP for it. One of my medications contains wheat starch. Is this gluten-free? No, it's not. We wouldn't recommend if you have wheat starch as an ingredient. Now, it's one of those things, if you have a tablet and there's wheat starch in it, the overall amount of it actually in your final tablet is probably tiny. But if there was an alternative version to that, you're probably better off with it. It just depends. It's a complicated one with medications. So most medications wouldn't have any wheat or gluten in them. But maybe just check in with your pharmacist about if they can find out in any way how much wheat is actually in there. It might be light enough that it's not an issue. Now, I think that is all of the questions, and I hope I got to everything for everyone. So thank you very, very much for coming today. And thank you for all the questions. It's fantastic that everybody was so involved with it. Obviously, we will send out a copy of the webinar to you, and we will send out your voucher if you want to book an appointment. If you have any issues, do come to us at the Coeliac Society. We provide a lot of advocacy and support for people with celiac disease, and for trying to find all those people who don't have celiac or don't realize they have celiac disease. So do get in touch with us, do visit us on the website, do come on to us at our Instagram, which is @Coeliac Ireland, for lots of information there. And thank you very much for taking part in all of the polls and everything today. So hopefully we'll see you at the next webinar. And thank you very much to Tesco, who sponsored this webinar for us as well. See you now. Bye-bye.